Hi, my name is Deb from DG Reads, and I'm here today to bring you my Horror Bingo Reading Challenge TBR. Sarah from Wicked Reading created a really fantastic reading challenge, which is a bingo board of horror reading prompts. And it's kind of like the R Fantasy, where you have a prompt and then you have a hard mode for that prompt. And the hard mode sometimes is really hard. I originally planned to not even try the hard mode with this one. I figured, let's take it easy. But who am I? I don't take things easy. So I am shooting for hard mode. There are some prompts on here where I'm not positive if the book I picked will really work. If it won't, I'll have to find something else when I get there. I may ask you along the way if there are any you think work or don't work. Let me know in the comments below. But without further ado, let's get into the reading challenge. So I think the easiest approach with this is just to go row by row. So starting in row 1, we start off with a pretty easy one, and that's to read a horror published in 2024. I read plenty of those. The hard mode for that is to make sure to read it by the end of the year. So for this, I'm going to go with Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. With this one, it is a child POV story. We've got this child with their parents, but there's also someone called Other Mommy who's asking to be let in. I don't know much more than that, but this is an author I have enjoyed in the past, and it is on my October TBR now, so I don't have any doubt about hitting hard mode for this one. The next prompt is The End Times Are Near. This one is to read something post-apocalyptic, and it needs a epilogue for hard mode. So for this, I am putting on a chunky beast, and this one is The Ferryman by Justin Cronin, and I really enjoyed the passage. I know that's unpopular opinion with some people, but I did really enjoy that series, so I have hopes for this one. I don't know anything about it though, in all honesty, other than I received a gifted copy from Ballantine Books quite a while back, and I need to get to it. Looking at the blurb, it just says it's a riveting standalone novel about a group of survivors on a hidden island utopia where the truth isn't what it seems. So I do tend to like dystopia, post-apocalyptic type books, so fingers crossed for this one. The next prompt is This Is Halloween, and this is to read a book set on or around Halloween. Hard mode for this is that Trick or Treat needs to be mentioned. For this one, I wasn't quite sure what to go with, so I was doing some online research and I found a KU book that is titled Trick or Treat. This is by Richard Tankersley Cusick, and it is, I believe, a YA horror about siblings who have moved into a rundown house, and then they find out about the house, secrets about the house, something dark. I don't know. I will find out. The fact that the title is Trick or Treat, I'm assuming Trick or Treat also plays into the story, but really the title's in the book, so that should count. The next prompt is for Blood on the Cover. Hard mode is that it just needs to be prominent. So for this one, I have Blood Covenant by Ellen Baxter. This one certainly has plenty of blood on there. And on the sprayed edge, this is a Twisted Retreat edition as well. We've got blood inside it, and even some on the naked hardcover as well at the top. So I am trying to get to more of my horror subscription books because I've got a lot of them sitting on my shelf, so you're gonna see a few of them on this TBR. This one is following some criminals. They conduct a failed bank heist, I believe, and then they go into hiding, but there's a family there. They take the family hostage, blood is spilled, and somehow this awakens a hungry, ravenous entity of some sort. And then the last prompt for this row has to do with the woods or wilderness, and this is to read a book set in the woods. Hard mode for this is there can't be trees on the cover. So for this one, I'm going to be reading Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews, and this is an upcoming release, so I don't have it in hand yet, but it does talk about there's two boys. One follows his friend into the woods where he sees him battling nightmare creatures and something about art coming to life. Therefore, it seems to be happening at least partially in the forest, and while the cover has some plants on it or vines on it, it does not have any trees. So I think this works for hard mode. And then moving on to row number 2, we start with Honoring the Classics, and this is to read a retelling or a classic. Hard mode is it needs to be a classic published before 1950. And I had a few that I had thought might work, which were published in the 1950s. But it took me a little bit longer to find one that I had on my shelves to get to. So I will be reading for this The Invisible Man. This is a classic. This was published in 1897. We're following a character who creates a serum to render himself invisible and then a descent into madness. So a classic that is on my list to get to, and this will give me the motivation to do that. The next prompt is to read translated work, and the hard mode for this is that it needs to have a translator's note in it. And I have ordered a copy of this book, and that is Jawbone by Monica Ojeda and translated by Sarah Booker, but my Pango order has been delayed in shipment by the fact that there's been some wild weather happening out there, so it's still en route. But from what I can tell, I believe this is one Sarah may have mentioned as a possibility, and some of the reviews that I read talked about a translator note, so I'm assuming this is going to fulfill the hard mode prompt once I get a copy of it. This one is talking about two friends who are as close as sisters, but then somehow one of them winds up tied up by a teacher and estranged from their friend. I don't know, but I've heard good things from a few different people and I'm excited to try it. The next prompt is a cover pick, and hard mode for this is you can't know anything about it. You just are going based on the vibes of the cover basically. And for this I've got River of Ashes by Alexandra Weiss and Lucas Astor. This is one I received in a subscription box, either Twisted Retreat or possibly one of their older subscriptions. I can't even remember at this point. It's been on my shelf for so long. I remember nothing about what this is actually about. The cover is really cool looking and it keeps catching my eye and making me want to read it. Got sprayed edges and some really pretty art under the cover as well, and foiling. So like I said, I don't know anything about this one. I'm going into it blind, but I'll let you know eventually probably. The next prompt is a Reaper read, and this is a book featuring death. And hard mode for this is it needs to include death as a personified character. And for this one, I struggled a bit. So I'm going with a dark fantasy that has horror elements, I believe, to it. And it's The 13th Child by Aaron A. Craig. And this one, we're following a girl whose godfather is death. So I think it fits. It sounds like it has enough horror elements for me to feel like it fits on a horror bingo board, and I have this one pre-ordered, so I'm looking forward to getting it. The next prompt and the final one on this row is for a spooky word in the title, and hard mode is it needs to have 2 spooky words. So for this one, I'm going with Crypt of the Moon Spider. I'm counting crypt and spider both as spooky words, and this is by Nathan Ballingrud. And I actually received this in a Nightworn subscription delivery and also a gifted copy from Tor, so thank you to them for that. So I definitely need to get to it. It's nice and short, and I have 2 copies, so I really should read one of them. This one is set on the moon in an alternate past, and there is a home for melancholia on the moon, and it's built over where a giant moon spider once lived, apparently. So sounds like it could be a good time. On to row number 3, we start off with Dead Man Walking, and the prompt for this is to read something about a reanimated corpse, like a zombie or anything along those lines. Hard mode is that it needs to be in a series. For this one, I'm going to be picking up Fever House, which is by Keith Rawson, and this is book 1. Book 2 just came out. This is a gifted copy I received from Random House quite a while back, so it's time I finally get to it. I don't know much about this going into it. We have a leg breaker who is going to collect some overdue money, and apparently there's a reanimated zombie hand of some sort going on here, so definitely suits the vibe of this prompt. The next prompt is genre bending, so reading a book that combines horror with something else, and hard mode is that it's combined with a genre you don't read much. And this is a struggle for me. I always struggle with reading a genre you don't read because I do read a little bit of everything, but romance is probably the thing I'm least drawn to, so I'm going with that. And I've got In the Roses of Pyera, and this is by Anna Burke, and it sounds like this one has a dark academia vibe with some horror and romance certainly in here. It says it delivers the shivers in this queer dark fantasy romance teeming with sensuous vampires, dark academia, plant horrors, and terrifying fungal fae. So that definitely has some buzzwords. It's a really pretty edition, again from Twisted Retreat. Some pretty art there underneath as well. So I will find out more about this one. The next prompt is to read a 5-star book. So basically, once you've read a 5-star horror, you can mark off the square. Hard mode, though, is that you need to predict it as a 5-star read. So for this one, I'm going with Model Home by River Solomon. This is an author I've given 5 stars to before. I really enjoy their writing. And this one, all I know about it going into it is it has a very bright green cover and that it's a twist, I think, on a haunted house story, which is something that really tends to work for me. So hopefully this will knock hard mode out of the park. And then we have a prompt to read a BIPOC author, and the hard mode is reading an author you haven't read before. So for this, I've got Your Utopia by Bora Chung, translated by Anton Her. And this came in a Nightworms subscription, I believe, and I've been wanting to get to it. This is an author I've been familiar with in the past. This is a collection of short stories. Don't know much beyond that. It says they are chilling new stories that will crawl deep under your skin and change the way you see the most mundane objects and everyday interactions. The final space on this row is to read a cryptid book. So a book about a cryptid creature like Mothman, Bigfoot, etc. The hard mode for this is that it needs to be a creature you don't know anything about. So this was another one that was a little bit of a struggle, but I found something on Kindle Unlimited that I'm intrigued to try, and that is The Uninvited Guest When Fear Comes Knocking. This is by Lucas T. Jacobs, and it is talking about the Yowie, which I think is like the Australian take on a Bigfoot, which I know nothing about what a Yowie actually is, but I guess I will be finding out. And then moving on to the next row, the first prompt is to read a book with a number in the title. Hard mode is it needs to have 2 numbers. And this is one of those that definitely is hard in hard mode, but I did find one that I am intrigued by, and it's 1 Second After by William R. Fortune. And this one is set in the US where an EMP has wiped out all electronics and basically sent the country back into the dark ages. Sounds like a bit of a survival tale, a horrific situation. I think it's kind of a mix of genres from what I understand, but it does fulfill the prompt. The second prompt on this row is Satanic Panic, and the hard mode for this is that the book needs to include an actual object from the occult to count for hard mode. So this is one I'm not sure about, but I am going with The Shadows by Alex North. This is one I've been wanting to get to for quite a while. It's described as having a murder, a crime in it that is called occult related, and so I'm hoping there's a reason for that, and maybe there's an object left at the scene that would tie it back to the occult in some way, but I'm fuzzy on whether that'll work or not. So it's a book I want to read anyway, so we'll give it a try. If it doesn't work, I'll keep looking. But this one is following, it sounds like a set of friends. One of them commits a horrible crime, murder against another of the friends, and then disappears. Maybe things are starting again later. I don't know, but I'm eager to find out. The next book on this row needs to be a book club read, and there's no hard mode for this one because book clubs are hard enough. And this one I'm going to be going with Graveyard Shift by ML Rio. This is one of the October picks for Literally Dead Book Club. They're reading a few different novellas this month, so I could have gone with any of those, but this one has had me intrigued. I've had it on my radar knowing it was coming out soon, and this is an author I've wanted to try because I haven't yet read them before, and I really don't know anything about it, so I am going in pretty blind, but with the novella, I like doing that. And then the next square is for kink horror, and this has to do with horror related to women and women's issues. And hard mode for this is it needs to be the author's debut. And for this one, I'm stretching it possibly just a tad, but I think it's okay. I'm gonna go with The Rust Maidens by Gwendolyn Kiss. And the reason why I say this is a stretch is just because I think this author had had some short stories or possibly a short story collection before this, but this definitely was their debut novel, so I'm counting it for hard mode. And this is one that's been recommended to me a couple of times, and it's set in 1980 Cleveland, and young women are starting to have rotting metal in their bodies or something along those lines. I don't know, but I will be reading it to find out. And then the last square on this row is a book with multiple POVs, and hard mode is that it also has at least 2 timelines in it. And for this one, I'm picking up Neverest by T.L. Bodine. This is another one I have from Twist Retreat. I think it's from one of their special edition boxes. boxes. And the way this, I think, will work for hard mode is that we're following a married couple, basically, who are traveling up Everest. The husband went up in the past and didn't come back. The wife is going up in the present to find out what happened. And the dual POV and dual timeline is that we're alternating, as best I can tell, between the wife's POV in the present and journal entries from the husband in the past. Some sort of journal that was left behind or that was found. I'm not clear, but it does go back and forth in time, just flipping through to see the chapter headings, so I'm assuming this is going to work for hard mode. And then moving on to the final row, we start off with As Seen on the Big Screen, and this is to read a book that has been adapted in film, TV, etc. And for this one, the hard mode is that you can't have already seen the movie. So I struggled a little bit finding a movie I hadn't seen before that had a book that I was interested in, but what I settled on is The Watchers by A.M. Shine. This one is recently, I think, adapted by Netflix, and it is a bunker in the middle of nowhere. Humans need to be inside it. They're being watched, and if they're out after dark, bad things happen. That's really all I know. That's probably a very bad synopsis for it, but I am looking forward to reading it and then probably watch the movie as well. And then next up we have Out of Your Comfort Zone. Hard mode for this is to find an author that you've read before that has written a book that's out of your comfort zone. And for me, cosmic horror, I think, is kind of my least comfort area in the horror genre of things that I am willing to try, at least. And for this, I picked up The Dead Take the A Train. This is by Cassandra Khaw and Richard Kadri, and I have read Cassandra Khaw before with not the best results, but I'm willing to try again. So this one, I really don't know much about. The synopsis is not super helpful. It's saying the main character is a coked up, burnt out 30-year-old whose only retirement plan is dying early. So I know nothing about this. The cover, though, always catches my eye and has had me intrigued, so this seemed like the time to pick it up. And then in the middle spot on this row, we've got a short story collection. Hard mode is it needs to have more than 12 stories. For this one, I have Root Rot. This is by Sarah Reed, and it does have quite a few stories in there, so definitely works for hard mode. It came in a Nightworm subscription, and I have pretty good luck with my track record with that, so I have the little signature plate for this one as well. But the cover is ultra creepy, and so it keeps catching my eye on my shelf, and now's the time to finally pick it up. The next spot is for a TBR vet, hard mode being that it needs to have been on your shelf or on your TBR for at least 2 years, and this book certainly works, and that is Revival by Stephen King. It's one that I haven't heard a lot about, but it sounds like there is a reverend who is cursing God, making fun of religion, and we're set in a small town. The blurb says it's deeply disturbing and spread over 5 decades, and this is a book by Stephen King. I have read nearly everything he's ever written. This is one of the few exceptions to that, so it's time to rectify that. And then the last spot on the board is Creepy Crawlies, and hard mode for this is that it needs to have representation of the creepy crawlies in the book on the cover. And for this one, I'm going with Mask of Flies by Matthew Lyons. This is one that was definitely a cover draw for me in the beginning, and it certainly works for the hard mode on this one. We're following a criminal and the cop who's out to get him. He's taking this cop hostage, but they have to wind up working together to survive a mix of real dangers and supernatural dangers, and I don't know much other than I'm intrigued. So that is my TBR. I am so excited for all of these. I want to get all of them onto my October TBR. It's not going to happen. This challenge is meant to run from October 1st through next September 30th. I don't suspect it'll take me a full year to get to all of these, but we'll see. We'll see if I wind up finding out some of them don't work for hard mode and then I have to find some additional reads. I don't know. If you have any thoughts on any of the books that I've put here, please let me know all your thinking down below. If any of these are ones that you don't think work for hard mode and you have a different suggestion, let me know that as well. Please. I would really appreciate it. And if you've made it this far and you don't have anything to comment, leave me an emoji that makes you think of horror. I would really appreciate it if you could hit that like button below if you enjoyed this TBR, and subscribe if you're interested in more of my content, more of my thoughts on these books, and on all of my bookish content. But for now, I'll leave you here and catch you real soon in a new video.